At Thanksgiving dinner, my son sat 3 chairs down from me while his wife carved the turkey and told a story that made everybody laugh. Then he set his fork on the edge of his plate and asked me, "Dad, is the back gate still sticking?" My hand stopped halfway to the water pitcher. That question was a code we built when he was 13 years old. It meant one thing, and only one thing. I can't get out. I didn't look at him. I finished pouring, set the pitcher down, and said, "Oiled it last spring, opens easy now." Which meant, "I heard you. I'm coming." His wife laughed at something my grandson said and reached over to fix the boy's napkin, and for 1 second her eyes came up and found mine across the table, and they were the warmest eyes in that room, and something behind them had gone very still. Before we go any further, my friend, do me a kindness. Leave a comment and tell me what city or what state you're watching from tonight. I go through every one of them. It matters, more than you know. And a note before we start. Some details of this story have been changed for the telling, and any resemblance to real names or real places is coincidence. The lesson in it, though, is worth every minute you give me. 4 hours before I understood what my family had walked into, Vivian Marsh was standing at the head of my dining room table with a carving knife in her hand, telling us all how thankful she was for the year we'd had. My name is Walt Reyes. Everybody calls me Walt. I'm 67 years old, and for 31 years I was a national bank examiner. I sat in conference rooms in Atlanta and Charlotte and Jacksonville and read other people's numbers for a living. And if there's one thing 3 decades of that work taught me, it's this: the account that steals from you is never the one that looks wrong. It's the one that reconciles perfectly, every quarter, for years, until the day you finally turn the page. Vivian Marsh reconciled perfectly. She was 39, chestnut hair she wore pinned up, a laugh she gave away for free, and the specific talent of remembering that Ruth couldn't eat shellfish, and that I take my coffee black, and that my grandson Oliver was terrified of the vacuum cleaner. 6 years earlier, she'd founded Harborlight Family Advocacy, a nonprofit in Savannah that helped families walk through hospice paperwork, long-term care applications, and the 1,000-page maze that opens up under you when somebody you love starts to fail. The Savannah Morning News had called her the woman who sits with families at 3 in the morning. A state senator's endorsement hung on her office wall in a frame. She had been given a key to a city building, which I did not know was a thing they still did. My son married her 4 years ago. I stood up at that wedding and I said I was grateful my boy had found somebody who ran toward hard things instead of away from them. I meant it, my friend. I want you to understand that I meant every word of it. That was before Thanksgiving. Ruth had been cooking for 2 days. My wife spent 32 years as a school nurse, and she cooks the way she used to triage a hallway full of kids, everything moving at once, and nothing forgotten. Turkey, oyster dressing, collards with the ham hock her mother taught her to use, and a pecan pie sitting on the counter since 2 in the afternoon with a dish towel over it. The house smelled like sage and wood smoke. It was 71 degrees outside, which is what November does to us down here, and the sliding door was open to the yard. Nathan sat across the corner from me, in a gray sweater. My son is 36 years old, a high school band director, the kind of man who can get 45 teenagers to care about a piece of music written in 1897. Oliver, who is 6, was explaining to the table with total seriousness that the metal detector he wanted for Christmas was not a toy metal detector, but a real one, because the toy ones only find quarters, and he was looking for a cannonball. "He's got a plan," Vivian said, and she pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. "He's been reading about the siege." The evening went the way good evenings go. Vivian mentioned the founders' dinner, the big black tie thing at the Riverfront Hotel on New Year's Eve where Harborlight was getting a humanitarian award. 2.5 million in pledges expected in the room. "It would mean a lot if you'd come, Walt," she said, and she looked right at me when she said it. A retired bank examiner standing next to me on that stage. "People trust a man who spent his life checking other people's math." I said, "I'd think about it." I was watching Oliver draw a cannonball on a paper napkin when Nathan put his fork down. The sound was nothing. A tine touching china. But I heard it the way you hear a smoke alarm chirp in a house you were sure was empty. He didn't look at me. His voice was completely ordinary. "Dad, is the back gate still sticking?" 23 years. A, 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 A. He hadn't used that code in 23 years. Not since he was 13 and a neighbor's dog had him backed into the corner of our yard for 11 minutes, and he didn't know how to yell for help in a way that wouldn't embarrass him. We built the code at the kitchen table that same week. Something anybody could ask. Something that only meant everything to me. I picked up my water and drank it slow. Oiled it last spring, I said. Opens easy now. Nathan reached for the collards. Vivian didn't react at all, which I have thought about every day since. She turned to Oliver and asked whether a real cannonball would be too heavy for a 6-year-old to carry, and Oliver said absolutely not, and everyone laughed. And the moment closed over, like water over a stone. 2 hours later, she hugged me at the front door. Warm, firm, the right length. Then she leaned in and dropped her voice under the noise of Oliver being zipped into a jacket he didn't need. He's been under some strain. Walt, she said. The band budget thing, the parents, he gets in his head. I'd hate for him to feel like everybody's watching him. I stepped back and looked her straight in the eye. Thank you for telling me, I said. She squeezed my arm and walked my son and my grandson out to a white SUV, and I stood in the doorway in the mild dark and watched the taillights turn at the corner, and something in my chest turned to iron. Ruth came up beside me and put both hands on my arm the way she does. What is it? She said. Not a question, I told her. My wife has a nurse's face. Ah, it doesn't fall apart in front of you. She looked at the empty street for a long moment and then she said, What do we do? Tonight we go to bed, I said. 2. In the morning I call the one person I know who's better at pulling a thread than I am. I called Loretta Pike at 6:40 the next morning. I was standing in my kitchen in a bathrobe watching the yard go from gray to green. She picked up on the second ring. Walter Reyes, she said, in the voice of a woman who considers sleeping past 6 a personal failing. You haven't called this number since Ruth's retirement party. I need a favor, I said. A big one. Loretta gave 22 years to the FBI's white-collar squad out of the Atlanta field office. 3 of her cases crossed my desk during my last decade of examinations, back when we were both trying to explain to somebody with authority that a bank in Brunswick was not okay. She left the bureau 4 years ago and opened a risk consultancy off Whitaker Street, 2 rooms and a coffee maker, doing the one thing she's better at than anybody I've met, finding the gap between what a person shows you and what is actually there. I told her all of it. The code. Nathan. Harbor Light. The whisper at my front door. She was quiet. For 11 seconds. I counted. Walt, she said, say the words out loud, so I know you understand what you're asking me. I think my daughter-in-law is running something, I said. And I think my son found out, and I think he's inside it, and I think he can't get out. Okay, she said. Don't call him. Don't text him anything you wouldn't read to a jury. Don't drive past the house. If she's what you think she is, she's watching the shape of your normal, and the second the shape changes, she'll know. Understood. Walt. Go. A pause. Live your life exactly the way you lived it Wednesday. That's the whole job for now. So I did. I raked the yard. I took Ruth to the farmer's market on Saturday like always. I let 4 days go by, and it was the longest 4 days of my life. On the 5th day, an envelope showed up in my mailbox behind the power bill. No return address. My name in Nathan's handwriting, small and careful. The letters crowded together the way his handwriting always goes when he's working hard at being calm. Inside was a library due date slip. On the back, 3 words in pencil. Storage. Not her name. I read it 3 times. Then I burned it over the kitchen sink with a fireplace match and watched it curl black, and I washed the ash down the drain. 2 days later, Vivian called me. Her voice came through the phone warm as a gas fireplace, comfortable, efficient, giving off exactly the right amount of heat. Walt, I hate to ask. The disposal in the Tybee rental packed it in, and I've got a family checking in Friday. Nathan's got districts all weekend. Any chance? Give me the address, I said. She met me there Thursday morning, a raised cottage on stilts 3 streets off the water, and pressed a key into my palm. Everything you need should be under the sink. Then she paused with one hand on the doorframe and her eyes went, just for a beat, toward the back of the property. Oh. Don't bother with the storage room under the house. The floor joists are shot down there. I'd stay out of it. Understood, I said. She patted my shoulder and drove off. I stood in that empty cottage for 10 seconds and counted my own heartbeat. Then, I went to work. I spent 40 minutes under that sink doing exactly what I'd come to do. There was a genuine problem, a seized flywheel and a split rubber gasket, and fixing it took me the better part of an hour and left grease on my hands and forearms as proof. Then I went down the outside stairs and walked to the storage room under the house. The door wasn't locked. Inside it smelled like sawdust and cold metal, beach chairs, a stack of plastic bins, a pegboard with garden tools, and on the far wall behind the bins, a green steel box about the size of a bread loaf with a 4-digit combination lock on the front. I tried Nathan's birthday. Wrong. Oliver's birthday. Wrong. Their anniversary. Wrong. I stood there with my hands on my knees and thought about 7 words on a library slip. Not her name. Not her character. Not her intentions. Her name. Loretta had told me 2 days earlier what she'd pulled out of the Chatham County records. Vivian Marsh had petitioned to change her name 9 years ago. Before that, she was Vivian Ledoux, and there was a sealed file under the old name that a judge had ordered expunged on the 9th of March, 11 years back. I entered 0309. The lock opened with a click that I felt in my teeth. Inside, a tablet with a cracked corner, 4 micro SD cards in a sandwich bag, and a 3-ring binder, navy blue, the vinyl gone soft at the corners from being opened and closed 1,000 times. I didn't have time to read. I photographed every page with my phone, fast and methodical, turning each sheet with a knuckle so I wouldn't leave a smear. 58 pages. 9 minutes. I put everything back exactly the way I found it, closed the lock, and walked up to the house. I was rinsing my hands at the kitchen sink when I noticed the small red light under the eave of the storage room, a camera set at an angle that covered the whole underside of the house and the bottom of the stairs. My stomach dropped exactly 1 inch, and then leveled off. I went back under that sink, gave the flywheel a final quarter turn I did not need to give it, texted Vivian a photo of the fixed disposal and the words, "All set." Old gasket was shot, and drove home going the speed limit the whole way. That binder was a customer list, my friend. That's the plainest way I know to say it. Loretta and a man named Curtis Bell spread the printouts across my dining room table on the first Tuesday in December. Curtis was 50, unremarkable in every direction, thinning brown hair and wire glasses, the sort of man you'd stand behind in a checkout line and never see. He'd spent 19 years as a forensic accountant with IRS criminal investigation before he went private. Loretta said if money went somewhere it shouldn't have, Curtis finds it. Each page had a family name, age, health status of the person who was failing, estimated equity in the home, whether the adult children lived out of state, and a column at the right margin with a number from 1 to 5 that Curtis figured out in about 40 minutes. It's a readiness score, he said. 1 means the family's still fighting. 5 means they'll sign anything you put in front of them to make the week stop. Harbor Light would show up at hour 1. Free. Genuinely helpful. They'd sit with a family in a hospital corridor at 2 in the morning and handle the Medicaid application and the DNR forms and the funeral home. And somewhere in that stack of 40 documents was a durable power of attorney with a successor agent clause and a care coordination agreement that gave Harbor Light authority to consolidate assets for continuity of care. 38 families in that binder. 11 of them had already lost a house. How much? I said. Curtis took off his glasses and cleaned them on his shirt, which I would learn was what he did instead of swearing. Through the entities I can see, 12.4 million. I went and stood at the window. I want to tell you about a man named Odell Grant, because he is the reason I stopped being a man gathering information and became a man who had decided something. Odell was 81, retired shrimper, 31 years working out of Thunderbolt, hands like the roots of a live oak. His wife Carol had gone into memory care in April. 2 Harbor Light people came to his kitchen twice a month with a folder and a notary and enormous patience. I sat with him at that kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon in December, and he poured me coffee I didn't want and told me the whole thing without once raising his voice. Then he got up, went to the counter, and came back with a cassette answering machine, the kind with the little tape door. "Never did trust putting my business in the air," he said. "Machine's older than my truck. It picks up the room if you press the button on the side." He'd recorded every single meeting, 11 of them, and there was more. In November, they'd brought him a transfer document, the house on Turner's Creek, a savings account, and a brokerage account his wife's father left her, $191,000 altogether, to be placed under Harbor Light's management subject to annual review. "That's not your signature," I said, looking at the signature line. "No, sir," he agreed. "It's a good one, though." He tapped the page with one finger. "Thing they don't know is, the paper I signed isn't this paper." Lawyer went out to the truck to take a call. I swapped it for a blank form I printed at the library the week before. Same weight of paper, close enough dimensions. I stared at him. They drove off with a sheet that says absolutely nothing, Odell said, and his smile came back slower this time, and meaner. My throat closed up and it had nothing to do with the coffee. Mr. Grant, I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. You just handed me the first piece of physical evidence in this case. He folded his hands, those big, scarred hands. Figured somebody'd come eventually, he said. Was starting to wonder if I'd have to walk it down to the police station myself. I lifted the document by its edges. I need to take this. I'll have it photographed and get it back to you. Keep it. Made 2 copies at the library. One's in a box at the credit union. He glanced toward a Bible on the counter. Other one stays right where it is. 3 copies. Safe deposit box. Physical backup at home. 81 years old. Running a counterintelligence operation out of his kitchen, with a library printer and pure stubbornness. He walked me to the door, and when I turned to thank him, he was already shaking his head. Don't thank me yet, he said. Thank me when that woman's in a room she can't walk out of. Then his hand found the door frame and his voice dropped. There's one more thing. The social worker that comes with them. The young one. His tea-colored eyes were very direct. She don't want to be there. I've seen enough men on a boat who didn't want to be on that boat. It looks the same on a woman in a nice coat. I drove home, and I did not turn the radio on. Now, before I tell you the thing I found next, the one that shook me worse than any page in that binder, I need to know you're still with me here, my friend. Type the number 7 in the comments. Just the number 7, that's all. It tells me you're riding with me tonight, and it helps this story find the people who need to hear it. And a reminder. Some details have been adjusted for the telling, and may not reflect events exactly as they occurred. If that's not what you came for, no hard feelings. This is a fine place to stop. Here's what shook me. Page 41 of that binder had a name on it I have known for 19 years. Pruitt, Ada, 79, widow, Bonaventure area, home clear. No mortgage, son deceased, niece in Ohio. No contact, high readiness schedule January. Miss Ada Pruitt lives 2 doors down from me. She's 79 years old and she leaves jars of fig preserves on my porch every August without knocking, just sets them down and goes. Her husband Ellis died 6 years ago and she still runs the battery tender on his truck in the carport because she cannot make herself let that engine die. I stood at my study window on a Wednesday afternoon and watched her out there with a garden hose, in a cardigan, in December, watering the camellias Ellis planted, humming something I couldn't hear. For 31 years I had thought about financial harm in the abstract. In footnotes, in basis points and restitution figures, where the human reality behind the number was present but muffled, filtered through the professional distance that lets a man do that work without being crushed by it. Ada Pruitt, bending over a camellia bush in a cardigan, was that weight, with no filter on it at all. I called Loretta. She picked up on the first ring. Ada Pruitt's on the list. Ada Pruitt's on the list, I said. My neighbor, 79. They've got her scheduled for January. A sharp breath on the other end. Not dramatic. 2. Loretta isn't dramatic. She's present. How sure are you? Are you? The entry's clear. The scoring's clear. The meeting is scheduled. I walked to the window and put a hand flat against the cold glass and watched Ada move to the next bush. She has no idea, Loretta. 19 years of fig preserves on my porch. She keeps a dead man's truck charged because she can't stand to be the one who turns it off. And in January, she's going to sit at her own kitchen table and think somebody finally came to help her. Loretta didn't say I know, and she didn't say I'm sorry. She let 3 full seconds of silence sit there and do their work. Then we don't let it get to January, she said. No, I said. We don't. We took it to the bureau. 11 days before Christmas. Special Agent Simone Ward was 46, close-cropped hair going silver at the temple, the tired eyes of a person who has been carrying something a long time without setting it down. She had been running a parallel look at Harbor Light for 7 months and had not moved, because what she had was thin and a bad indictment is worse than no indictment. She read Odell Grant's swapped contract twice. Then she looked up. Where did you get the binder photographs? From a storage room I was invited into by the person who owns the property, I said. While performing a plumbing repair I was asked to perform. Ward looked at Loretta. Loretta looked at the ceiling. Mr. Reyes, Ward said. I need you to understand something. Your son is inside a controlled environment with a person who is, on this evidence, running a predicate scheme. If she believes he's cooperating, the calculation on her end changes. I'm not saying that to frighten you. I know why you're saying it. Then hear the rest. I can't move on this before the founders' dinner, unless something changes. What I need is a witness from inside the organization. Odell Grant's voice came back to me, standing in his doorway. She don't want to be there. Her name was Corinne Delacroix, 34, hospice social worker, 3 years, at Harbor Light. She met Nathan in the bathroom of a bookstore cafe on a Thursday afternoon because she'd noticed months earlier that the women's room there had no interior camera and she had filed that away without knowing why. I'm going to say this fast, she told him. There's a complaint in my licensing file. Vivian wrote it. It's false, and it's very good, and if I try to leave, she files it. I've got a daughter. I don't have a second career in me. Nathan asked her what she wanted. Same thing you want, Corinne said. Out, in a way that means something. Then she reached into her bag and gave him a photograph of the binder's index page and the name of the offshore management company that held the Harbor Light continuity accounts. I did not learn any of this for 9 more days. What I learned first was that my son had been 3 steps ahead of me the entire time. We met in the parking lot behind a hardware store on the Sunday before Christmas, both of us with hoods up like a couple of amateurs. He got into my truck and shut the door, and for a second neither of us could speak. Dad, he said, I need you to not ask me if I'm okay. All right. He reached into his jacket and put a micro SD card on the console between us. Her office, he said. There's a magazine cover on the wall, the one from the profile. It's the only thing in that building she dusts herself. He almost smiled. It's taped behind the mat. I looked at that little black square of plastic and my eyes went hot. You hid it in the monument to her own ego, I said. You told me once, Nathan said, that the best hiding place is the one the other person's too proud to search. I told him that when he was 11 years old and hiding a diary from his cousin at a family reunion, he'd carried it for 25 years and spent it, in the worst month of his life, on a federal fraud investigation. His phone buzzed. Her name on the screen, 1 minute early. He looked at it, then at me, his jaw set. He answered in a voice that was perfectly normal. Hey. Yeah, I'm at Ace. They didn't have the 8-inch, so I got 2 of the 6. No, he's fine. Mom's got him doing puzzles. A small laugh. An easy one. The laugh of a man thinking about absolutely nothing. Yeah. Love you too. He hung up and closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then he opened them, squeezed my forearm once, hard, and reached for the door handle. Go home, Dad, he said. Don't change anything, not one thing. He was out of the truck and across the lot before I could answer. Here's the part I got wrong, my friend, and I'm going to tell it straight, because you've earned it. 2 days after Christmas, Vivian came to my house alone with a bottle of bourbon that cost more than my first car and a leather folder under her arm. A letter of support, she said, sliding it across my coffee table. For the program. Just a paragraph. People trust your name, Walt. I read it the way I have read every document put in front of me for 31 years, not just for what the words say, but for what they're built to do. The 3rd paragraph contained a clause confirming that the undersigned had reviewed Harbor Light's financial statements and found them accurate and complete. That is not an endorsement. That is a statement of fact. If I signed it and the statements were later shown to be falsified, my signature could be used to argue that I had either participated in the fraud or papered over it. She hadn't come for my name. She'd come for my liability. I'd need to see the audited statements, I said, and set the folder back down. Audited, not summaries. Board minutes for the last 2 fiscal years, and every vendor paid over $50,000. Something moved behind her eyes. Khalid, 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 Khalid. Not anger, not surprise. The specific recalibration of a person who had prepared for this branch and was now opening the correct file. Of course, she said. I'll have the team pull it before the dinner. She stayed 20 more minutes and talked about the seating chart and a donor from Isle of Hope she described as deeply moved by the legacy initiative. I poured us both water. The bourbon sat unopened on the table between us. When she left, she took it with her. I stood in my doorway and watched her back out, and Ruth appeared at my elbow with her arms crossed against the cool. She took the bourbon, Ruth said. She did. Ruth. 1. Actor. He's 1. Our burb. Why would a woman bring a $200 bottle to a conversation and carry it home again? Because she didn't come to bring us anything, I said. She came to see whether I'd sign. And she didn't want to leave a single thing behind in this house that she couldn't account for. 4 days later, a feature ran in a regional lifestyle magazine about the founder's dinner. In it, spliced out of a note I'd written for my son's wedding 4 years earlier, was a sentence attributed to me. A career spent checking other people's numbers teaches you to recognize the real thing. My name, her event, my credibility, taken without my signature. And that night my son texted me 4 words that stopped my heart. Back gate's fine now. Wrong. It was wrong. My friend. That. This me. This. The code was a question, and it was always a question, and it was always his question. That message was a statement, and it was sent from a phone that somebody else was holding, and it meant she had found something. I called Loretta at 11:40 at night, and my hands were not steady. New Year's Eve, my son and my grandson did not come to my house. Vivian told Ruth on the phone that Oliver had a fever. Ruth said, of course, poor lamb, and hung up, and stood in the kitchen holding the phone against her sternum with both hands. Ada Pruitt's carport light came on across the street on its timer, the way it does at 6 every evening, because Ellis put it on a timer in 2011 and nobody has ever changed it. I sat in my study that night with the drawer open and looked at what we had. Odell's original contract in the manila envelope he'd carried it out of his kitchen in, Curtis's 50-page trace of the offshore management fees, Corinne Delacroix's licensing file, the card from behind the magazine mat, 58 photographed pages, all of it assembled from a library printer, a shrimper's answering machine, a bookstore bathroom, and a code invented at a kitchen table 23 years ago. I closed the drawer. I took the brass gate hinge out of my pocket, the old one, the one I'd replaced that spring, the one I'd been carrying since Thanksgiving without ever deciding to, and turned it over in my fingers the way I'd done 100 times in 5 weeks. Then I went and stood at the bottom of the stairs in the dark and listened to the particular silence of a house where the people you love are asleep, and I felt the whole weight of it, the 31 years. The code, the hinge, the 38 families in that binder, Odell and his Bible, Ada and her camellias, Corinne and her daughter, Nathan, at 13, with a dog in the corner of the yard, Nathan, at 36, with 4 words sent from somebody else's hand, all of it resting on tomorrow night. Before I tell you what happened in that ballroom, and what Vivian Marsh said when she finally put her cards face up on the table, I want to ask you one thing. Type the letters G-A in the comments right now. Just those 2 letters. So I know you're still here with me. After everything we've walked through together, I'd honestly like to know, and once more, portions of what follows have been adjusted for the telling. If that's not for you, that's completely all right. Choose what's good for you. I watched the beginning of that dinner from a rented room on the 4th floor of a hotel across the river, 3/10 of a mile from the ballroom, with a laptop, 2 phones, and Loretta Pike sitting on the end of the bed. Nathan went in at 7 wearing a tuxedo and a wire that Agent Ward's technical people had put on him at 4 that afternoon in the back of a van behind a barbecue restaurant on Bay Street. At 8:52, the camera feed we'd been given access to went to static. At 8:53, Loretta was on the phone with Ward. At 8:54, the feed came back for 11 seconds. And in those 11 seconds, I saw enough. The corridor outside the service elevator, Nathan moving fast. Vivian behind him, one hand closed on his upper arm. Not violent, not yet. The grip of a person who has decided that the next 60 seconds will determine the rest of her life and is not going to leave anything to chance. A fire door opening, a stairwell, then static. I stood in the middle of that rented room with my hands at my sides and understood, with the clarity of a man who has run out of options, that the next 4 minutes were entirely outside my control. There was one camera still up, the parking deck. Level 2. A black crew cab pickup idled near the freight elevator. A man I would later know as Terrence Vaughn sat behind the wheel. A second man stood at the passenger door with his weight forward and his eyes on the stairwell door, and his posture told me everything about what his job was that night. The stairwell door opened. Vivian came through first, then Nathan, her hand still on his arm. She walked him toward that truck with the economy of a person executing a procedure she had rehearsed. Vaughn reached back and opened the rear door from the inside. My son's face in that sodium light was chalk white and perfectly still. He planted his feet. "Get in," Vivian said. "Quiet. Level." "No," Nathan said. She pulled him forward. He stumbled, caught himself, and turned toward the truck. And then, he lifted his right hand and opened it. A key fob. Reprogrammed. Dead. Not the truck. Reprogrammed. The marina gate down at the river, where a 42-foot boat was fueled and sitting in a slip under a name that wasn't hers, and where a gate that will not open at 8:56 on New Year's Eve might as well not exist. I taught him that when he was 16. I took him down to Thunderbolt and showed him a locked gate and a boat behind it, and I said, "Son, a boat you can't get to is the same as a boat that isn't there." And he nodded with the serious attention of a teenager who was certain he would never in his life need that information. He needed it. Vivian looked at the dead fob in my son's hand, and the mask came off. Not in anger, not dramatically. It simply went away. The warmth, the ease, the perfect calibration of every expression gone, and what was underneath was not rage. It was the absence of whatever it is in a person that lets them recognize another person as real. Then the parking deck filled with light and Agent Simone Ward's people came out of 3 directions at once. Here is what the ledger looked like when it was finished. 38 families confirmed as direct victims. Combined losses, across both entities, exceeding $12.4 million. 9 people indicted alongside Vivian Marsh, 2 attorneys, a notary, a financial advisor, a property manager, and 4 Harbor Light employees. Corinne Delacroix gave a proffer that Ward described as the most complete internal account she had ever taken from a cooperating witness. Odell Grant's 11 cassette tapes were entered into evidence in a Ziploc bag with a rubber band around them. Restitution ran 19 months. Not all of it came back. It never does. But in September, Odell Grant sat at his kitchen table with a check for $161,000 and used part of it to move Carol to a facility 8 minutes from his house, instead of 50, so he could go every single day, which he does. On a Thursday afternoon in early January, before any of that, I walked 2 doors down and knocked on Ada Pruitt's front door. She opened it in a house sweater with a dish towel over her shoulder and looked at me with the mild surprise of a woman whose neighbor of 19 years has never once knocked. "Walt," she said. "Everything all right?" "Everything's all right," I said. "I wanted you to know, there's an organization that may have reached out about helping with the house. Harbor Light. If anybody from that outfit contacts you, or if you get a call from a lawyer's office you didn't call first, I'd take it kindly if you'd ring me before you sign anything." Ada looked at me for a moment, pale blue eyes, going over my face the way eyes move when they're deciding how much to read into a thing. "Is that a real concern?" "It was," I said. "It isn't anymore. But I wanted you to know." She nodded, slowly. Then she said, "You want to come in? I made gumbo." I stood on her porch in the January cool and thought about page 41. High readiness. Scheduled January. And about the camellias, and about Ellis's carport light burning faithfully on its timer. "Another time," I said. "I just wanted to be sure you knew." She nodded again. Then she reached out and put her hand on my shoulder for a second, the gesture of a woman who understood something had happened that she wasn't being told all of, and had decided to trust the one telling her. "Good neighbor," she said, and went back inside. Sentencing was in April. Vivian Marsh stood up in a federal courtroom in a gray suit and heard a number that I will not repeat here because it isn't the part that matters. Before the marshals took her out, she turned and looked at me for a moment. Not Nathan, me. Her expression was exactly what it had been on level 2 of that parking deck. No anger. No grief. Just the absence. She held my eyes for 3 seconds. Then she turned and walked out, and the door closed behind her. Ruth was waiting on the courthouse steps with Oliver. He had on a red jacket and a paper airplane he'd folded out of the parking receipt. When he saw his father come through the doors, he ran. Nathan caught him under the arms and lifted him and put his face into the side of my grandson's neck and stayed there. I stood next to my wife and she took my arm with both hands the way she'd done on Thanksgiving night when the code came back into our lives. And we watched our son hold his son in the thin April light on the steps of a federal courthouse, and I felt the weight of something enormous finally being set down. Oliver leaned back and studied his father's face with the total seriousness of a 6-year-old inspecting anything. "Is she in trouble forever?" he asked. "For a long time, buddy," Nathan said. Oliver considered that. Then he held up his paper airplane. "Can we get a peach shake?" And my son laughed. Suddenly, all the way, A laugh I had not heard out of him since before Thanksgiving. It went through me like the first warm day after a long winter. "Yeah," he said. "Absolutely yeah." I put my hand in my jacket pocket and found the brass hinge where it had been every day since November. An old gate hinge off a fence I built myself in 2003. It never held a gate again after I replaced it. It held something else instead. I left it in my pocket and followed my family down the steps. Now let me say the practical part out loud, my friend, because a story that only makes you feel something and never makes you do something is just entertainment, and you deserve better than that from me. Pick a phrase tonight. A real one, an ordinary one, something anybody could say at a dinner table and only your people would hear. Give it to your kids and your parents and tell them what it means. It costs you nothing and it might cost somebody else everything. Never sign a document the same day it's handed to you. Not one. A person who is genuinely helping you will wait until Monday. A person who is not will explain, warmly and with great concern, why Monday is too late. Any nonprofit asking your family for authority over your money has a Form 990 sitting in public view, and you can read it for free, and it will tell you where the money actually goes, and this one matters most. When somebody starts positioning themselves between an aging person and everybody who loves them, handling the calls, coming to the appointments, explaining that the family is upsetting them, that is not devotion, that is isolation, and isolation is the tool. Every single time. Looking back, I wasn't a hero. I was a father who almost waited too long. That was my kind of justice. Not rage. Not payback. I wasn't. Hi can. A. Hi. 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 Hi, 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 hi. The quiet, stubborn decision to protect the people I love before the damage got past fixing. Family justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a retired man standing in a rented hotel room across a river, counting seconds, with nothing left he can do. I believe the right people got put in each other's path at the right time. Odell with his tapes, Corinne with her nerve, Ruth with her nurse's face that doesn't fall apart in front of you. I didn't save my family alone. None of us ever does. Here's what I want to leave you with. Don't make the mistake I made. Don't wait for a code you wrote 23 years ago to tell you something is wrong. Trust the thing in your gut that goes quiet when it should be easy. Ask the uncomfortable question earlier than is comfortable. Revenge is worthless when the people you love are already suffering under a silence you were too polite to break. And when a person shows you who they are, believe them the first time. If this story reached you, leave me one word in the comments, just one, for how you're feeling right now. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because the stories coming will stay with you a good while. Thank you for walking all the way to the end of this one with me. It means more than you know. One last word before our next story. Some of what's coming contains fictionalized elements, offered for reflection and for learning. If that isn't for you, that's perfectly all right. Choose what's good for you.